Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers. Welcome back to the podcast in one of my favorite episodes to put together each month, where I talk about the books that I read over the past month to tell you which books I loved and recommend that you read, or perhaps talk about some books that didn't quite hit the mark for me. So I suggest that you skip them or maybe borrow them from the library if possible if you want to check them out. With so many new romance books releasing every day, and honestly, my TBR list growing and growing, I want to help you read only the best romance books worth reading, and that's what I hope to do today by discussing the books that I read this past February. And I will say my February reading list reflects, honestly, what I love most about reading the romance genre, and that is the variety that it offers. I can pick so many different books based on my mood or what I'm interested in at any given moment, and there is honestly going to be something that matches what I'm looking for. So this month, I read historical, I read spicy and erotic romance, I read what I kind of call a poignant romance and sweet romance. So much variety, and I loved it. And I have to say that most of the books scored pretty high in my book. Not all, but definitely the majority. So a great reading month for me all around. Okay, time to dive in with the first book that I read, which was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is her new fake relationship Guardian Ward romance that will release on April 2nd of this year. I was in the mood to read something really, really good. And after reading Yours Truly by Abby last year and absolutely loving it, I knew that it was time to pick up her new book off my TBR list and check out the advanced reader copy, because I had a feeling it was going to hit the spot, and it totally did. I mean, I am just in awe of this woman's writing, and the storyline that she came up with was amazing. To be honest, I went into it thinking I was going to read, a fun rom-com based on the summary, on just a really cute summer fling romance, but it actually had a more, I'll say, heavy tone to the book. Not that that was a bad thing, just not really what I was expecting, because, man, I was like bawling my eyes out at one point with this book. But that's just because she made me feel so much for these characters. Okay, but what's it about? So we meet Justin, who is the hero of the story, and he has a curse, or he believes he has a curse, we'll say. Every woman that he dates goes on to find their soulmate the second the two of them break up. Now, I've seen other books with this storyline, which I think is actually kind of clever, but it's really just the branching off point of this story. So one day then our heroine, Emma, messages him after seeing, I think it was a Reddit post or an article about his, supposed curse, and says that she has the same problem. So the two of them get to texting. And then one day, Justin concocts this plan and says, hey, why don't the two of us date for a bit so that we can then break both of our curses and both finally find our own soulmates after we break up? So what was supposed to be sort of this quick fling turns out to be obviously so much more in this story. Because, one, Justin ends up assuming guardianship of his 3 younger siblings for a particular and very heart-wrenching reason, which I won't spoil. Plus, during their sort of 1 month, fake dating relationship, Emma's toxic mother shows up and then throws her into a tailspin at the same time. So a lot going on for these two who really do hit it off and just think, oh, we're going to be friends and fake date. But obviously they fall in love and it's just amazing. This book, though, really did strike a chord with me. I honestly was sort of, I'd say, off in my own world for several hours after finishing it because I kind of just had to sit with everything that happened and just embrace these characters a bit more before saying goodbye because I just had so many feelings, I think, after reading it. I wrote in my review that what I think makes a great author stand out from a mediocre writer is the fact that they can create such engaging characters with interesting backstories that don't feel, two-dimensional, fake, or even perfect. I felt like Abby created a romance for Justin and Emma that truly read like a real romance. And maybe that sounds ridiculous, but hopefully you know what I mean. It was full of these sweep me off my feet moments, but also full of just, realities that made this happily ever after so hard fought and really earned. I think it can be easy for someone to write just that fairy tale romance, but to write a romance with characters that have to deal with real world problems such as neglect, denial, and family responsibilities is really something else. I personally think the issues of abandonment, trauma, and avoidance that Emma faces could be triggers for some folks who want to pick this book up. So just FYI on that, I truly vacillated from feelings such as sadness and anger and hope for her. Gosh, and I just wanted to tell her mother off so many freaking times. And then there's this, heaviness that was weighing down Justin's shoulders too. But gosh, what a man he is. I loved every single thing about this hero who stepped up not only for his siblings, but for Emma as well, time and time again. One more thing about this book. I also love books with the best side characters, and Emma's best friend, Maddie, is freaking amazing. Never has there been a better friend, I think, written in romance. I just admire her so much, and the things that she would just say and reflect back to Emma, I think, were just golden. So I cannot recommend this book enough. So be sure to add Just for the Summer to your TBR list and grab it when it releases in April. All right, another book that I read in February was Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, which is part of her Love Light Farm series. It became available at my local library, so I snatched it up, and I am so glad that I did because I loved Love Light Farms, the first book in the series, and definitely need to finish and devour the entire series, but Mixed Signals was up next for me. It's a super sweet and steamy small town romance that features an amazing cinnamon roll hero. Oh my gosh, loved him. And a baker who hasn't had the best luck in love. And then the fake relationship that they both agree to that turns into a bit of some sex coaching or sex tutoring, if you will. And I love that romance trope, so it was awesome. Our heroine, Layla Dupree, she is the phenomenal baker at Love Light Farms and friend to Beckett, the tree farmer, and Stella, the owner of Love Light Farms. So she makes these amazing, amazing pastries, but totally sucks at finding love. The poor girl. Then in walks Caleb Alvarez. Now, Caleb, though, is not a stranger to Layla. He's been going to her bakery every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for years because he loves her croissants. And I think, he might be slow to admit that he also has a thing for Layla. She, on the other hand, has been pretty oblivious to him until she sees him one night at a bar in a Hawaiian shirt, of all things, there for a bachelor party. And it's like, or maybe it was a birthday party. I can't remember. And it's like she all of a sudden, sees him in this different light. And it's as though she's sort of seeing him with different glasses, or maybe like the fog has finally lifted, if you've ever had that experience or read that moment in another book. So
Caleb ends up helping her out after a disastrous date and learns sort of more about her difficulty with dating as of late. And he actually confides that he hasn't had the best track record in dating either, because he just kind of, he thinks, comes off as being too much too soon. So they end up devising this plan that for 1 month, they will start a fake relationship that will have, or where they will go on these like no strings attached dates with the goal of, one, renewing Layla's faith in men, and then also so that she can kind of rate Caleb's dating game. So, and I can see why the whole fake dating thing is popular, because, it takes the pressure off, right? You can just be yourself in this no judgment zone instead of trying to mold yourself to impress someone. But, of course, the chemistry between these two is amazing. And then soon after like one date, in one conversation, she admits to never having had an orgasm from another person and really not knowing what she might like. And Caleb is like, well, let's figure that out together. I mean, this guy was so freaking sweet. And yet their bedroom moments got so hot and yet were so really real. Like Borson just wrote that so freaking good. It was awesome. And I think you will seriously fall hard for these two like I did. Their first 2 dates were honestly hilarious. So not perfect. And yet they were kind of at the same time. And then there's like this one point in the story where she's worried that she's taking too long to come to orgasm. And he's like, don't worry about it. I like to work for it. I mean, this guy, God, he not only, is an amazing friend and lover, but he's a substitute teacher. He has amazing forearms and he has the cutest blushes. Honestly, he couldn't be any cuter. So highly, highly recommend Mixed Signals if you have not read this gem by B.K. Borson. All right, next up on my list are 2 novellas that I read this month, which count towards the February Romance Book Reading Challenge, because one of the prompts over February was to read a novella, and I read 2. And I'm patting myself kind of on the back for incorporating this prompt for the month because it coincided perfectly with the release of the Amazon Originals series of the Improbable Meet Cute novellas, which are 6 short stories from best-selling authors including Christina Loren, Abby Jimenez, Sally Thorne, Jasmine Guillory, Ashley Poston, and Soraya Wilson, and who all of these authors turn these improbable first encounters into hopelessly romantic, happily ever after stories. All of them are available to read and listen to with a Kindle Unlimited subscription, by the way, so you should totally snag that and read or listen to all of them. So I picked up the novella by Christina Loren, which is called The Exception to the Rule. And I'll tell you a little bit what it's about. So February 14th, an accidental email to a stranger opens the door to an unexpected relationship in which C and T, gosh, I'm now blanking. I think those were their initials. Don't hold me to that one. So they end up being pen pals, wishing each other a happy Valentine's Day for years, but never, sending any pictures and not sharing any real names, just going by those initials, which I'm totally blanking on, or any personal identifying information. But then, as more years pass, the rules for these email quote dates begin to break and they wonder if maybe they should actually meet in person. So I'm not going to give away what happens because it's kind of a unique twist to the story that made this such a fun short read. You have to, though, give it a bit where the initial email back and forth those first years, it's kind of just bare bones emailing, but it sort of sets the foundation for them to continue this, crazy tradition, on Valentine's Day. And then they end up sort of sharing more as the years go by. So just stick with it for a few chapters of those email exchanges. And then it gets, super cute. I do have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, as I said, so I'm definitely going to go back and check out these other novellas in the series. And I know some readers in my She Reads Romance Books Reader Lounge on Facebook have read them and enjoyed them, so I'm definitely going to do that when I'm just in the mood for a short, quick read or listen. Now, the second novella I read in February is Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. This book is on my best New Year's Eve books list because it does start off on New Year's Eve in the bar called Sluggers, where our heroine Britta works. It's also this regular hangout spot for the Bridgeport Bandits, which is the local hockey club who her half-brother also plays for, as well as this giant defenseman, Sumner Mayfield. So this is not an ordinary New Year's Eve, as Britta's half-brother and the entire team begs her to marry Sumner that night to keep him in the U.S. because he's Canadian and his work visa is going to expire the very next day. And he needs to stay on the team because he is so close to being pulled up or called up to the NHL. And if he were forced to return to Canada, then his chances of that happening would really, be all but lost. Now, if there was one man that Britta would maybe consider breaking her no dating the hockey players policy and her no marriage at all rule, it would be Sumner. I mean, the guy who seems to always be watching her. But she's like, no, marriage is not for me. I'm not going to do it. But then her half-brother sort of mentions that some money may be involved. And so she relents and agrees to marry him so that he can get his green card. And they agree to stay married for a year to make it, look legit. Now, Sumner in this novella was awesome. He's the cutest cinnamon roll who was totally gaga over Britta. I could understand, though, her hesitation about marriage and love given her past. But, I mean, there was no way she could resist this big guy. I wish we did get a bit more build up to her finally coming to grips with her feelings and them becoming more and even a little bit more around the whole green card business, where that was just kind of glossed over. Again, granted, it's a novella. It's short, but it was a super cute marriage of convenience story. So I would definitely give that one a go if it interests you. Okay. After reading those two novellas, I read even more to meet the February Romance Book Reading Challenge, which also gave the reading prompt to read one spicy romance book. And boy, did I pick a super spicy book for my selection, which was Give Me More by Sarah Kate. Now, this is book 3 in her Salacious Players Club series, which have all gotten new covers, by the way. Well, all except the last one, which hasn't been released yet. You can find that series list up on She Reads Romance Books if you want to check them out. Now, I read book 2 in the series last month, Eyes on Me. And to be honest, I wasn't thrilled with it, which I think because I went into it with different expectations of the story. So I wasn't really wowed, but I know so many people who love this series that I wanted to give it another shot. Plus, I was like, oh my goodness, once I read the book summary, to give me more because it features a married couple, which I love. So Hunter, our hero, is part owner of the Salacious Players Club, which is an adult club where people can explore and practice their kink. He's roped in his best friend Drake to help with various construction projects for the club. And Drake is a man who has this reputation for really being a complete man whore. And he uses his free membership to the club quite well, always having a new partner, male, female, or multiple partners on his arm or in his bed. But now Hunter and his wife Isabel, with Drake in tow, are taking a cross-country road trip touring other kink clubs. And it's kind of making Hunter question what his own kink may be because it hasn't really made itself known yet, unlike some of the other co-owners to the club. But then he has this idea that sort of pops into his head, or after going to one of the clubs on their tour, of watching Drake, his best friend, sleep with Isabel, his wife, while he watches. And he realizes how turned on he is by it, and actually then voices this desire to his wife and his best friend. And their eyes are just like, bugged out, right? Now, behind the scenes, Drake has always been attracted to Isabel and loves her, but of course would never make a move on her. Plus, he's always loved his best friend too. Drake has always been this fixture in Hunter and Isabel's marriage. So Isabel would admit that she finds the man attractive and kind of isn't opposed to the idea. Though both, Drake and Isabel realized that trying out this kink could have some, major repercussions for everybody's relationships. Now, I love that Sarah Kate unabashedly writes taboo and spicy romance. She's like, I'm here for it and I'm bringing it. And she totally did in this one. She does such a great job of setting up all of the relationships involved in this one. The two men who have been best friends through thick and thin for years. Two people have a strong marriage and just a really strong friendship between all three of them. And she does a great job of how they all sort of wrestle with this idea initially and later with how things move from just this opportunity to explore kink to it being really more in a way that honestly Hunter wasn't completely anticipating. So I thought the beginning of this was just so completely captivating, and I thought it was really well done in terms of looking at a poly relationship in a romance. I gave it 4.5 stars, so definitely one I highly recommend if this is your cup of tea or have comfort with this level of spiciness in a book. Now, moving on to a more spicy historical romance, I decided to pick up a throwback title that had been on my TBR list for a while, and that was A Wicked Kind of Husband by Mia Vinci, and this book released in 2018. It is book 2 in her Long Hope Abbey series, which honestly I only realized after the fact. So I read this as a standalone and had no problems doing so if you want to just jump in with it as well. This is also about a married couple, but a very kind of different married couple. One that only met once on their wedding day 2 years ago when they agreed to a marriage of convenience, but then have been living apart ever since. Now, Cassandra DeWitt only married her husband to secure her inheritance, and since their wedding day, she's been living on her own, looking after her 2 younger sisters and her ailing mother. But when it comes time to launch her sister into society, she decides to travel to London in hopes that her grandmother will aid her in that process. But at the same time, it turns out that her husband, Joshua, is in London too, reuniting the married couple, much to their joint displeasure, under one roof, because Cassandra now feels like she has to share a house with a man who is super infuriating and doesn't necessarily abide by, societal rules in terms of behavior. And he just doesn't want a wife disrupting his life, and yet especially not a wife who is now tempting him. But then a person from Cassandra's past draws up a lawsuit against her husband, and the two sort of then at that point pair up as a team to confront it and just happen to ignite the passion between them as well. Now, let's be real, the very quick consummation of their marriage on their wedding day did not make Cassandra a fan of the wedding bed. But that soon changes, and she's like, oh, okay, this is how it could be, and I really like it. But they both know that he's only in London for short business activities, and she's only in town to launch her sister. So they fall into this, sexual relationship that they think is going to be short-lived, despite them really falling for each other in the process. Anyway, a couple other things come up, but you'll have to read the story to see how they sort of manage through all of the things that are trying to. So I highly recommend A Wicked Kind of Husband by Nia Vinci. All right. This past month, too, in February, I could not hold off any longer from reading the next sports romance book in Tessa Bailey's new series, Big Shots, which started with her recent release, Fangirl Down, which I adored, and now continues with the Au Pair Affair, which releases in July. Now, like I said, I loved Fangirl Down, which I know I've mentioned before already, especially, I can't remember which podcast episode, but it's already on my list of best romance books of 2024 because it was so good. So my expectations were pretty high going into the Au Pair Affair. Now, this book is another sports romance, but this one features a hunky grouch of a hockey player, not another golfer, who just happens to be best friends with Wells Whitaker from Fangirl Down. And then our heroine is the marine biology student Tallulah, who is Josephine's best friend, Josephine being the heroine of Fangirl Down. Now, there was one scene in Fangirl Down, if you haven't yet read it, where you meet these two main characters, and it's where they meet for the first time too, and come up with this idea that Tallulah, who plans to continue her studies in Boston, will move in with Burgess to be his au pair and live in nanny to his tween daughter, Lissa, in exchange for her, basically having a room rent free because she's pretty strapped for cash. Now, first off, I loved these two characters. With so many books under her belt already, I don't know how Tessa Bailey keeps creating new characters with such unique personalities and life experiences, but I'm totally here for it, and I just want her to keep on cranking them out, baby, because I'm going to read them. I thought, honestly, I was going into a Grumpy Sunshine, age gap, nanny romance, which it sort of is, but yet it isn't at the same time. The focus to me is actually much more on Tallulah, how a situation from her past really shaped her into someone very fearful of trusting men, and rightly so, to be honest. And so now you find her at the beginning of the story, she's about to move in with this huge hockey player known as Sir Savage because he's savage on the ice, and she's like, what the heck am I doing? I don't know this guy. He's a complete stranger. But Burgess was such a great juxtaposition. I mean, yes, he's this enforcer on his NHL hockey team. And yet with Tallulah, he was just so gentle, empathetic, completely caring. He immediately became her safe space when on paper and at first glance, he should have been someone who honestly terrified her. But he is top-notch book boyfriend, people, because he never pushed Tallulah. He instantly became her protector and bodyguard for these adventures that she wanted to go on and so forth, and just really only wanted the best for her. He was a total goner when it came to her from the very start. So it's definitely a he falls first kind of romance. And even his hang up, with their age gap really didn't gain steam. And I'm glad it didn't, because it just didn't seem like an issue because they were both pretty mature adults. I also like that there wasn't really any drama with the ex, which can happen in single parent and nanny romance books. What did surprise me, let me tell you, was that this guy could do dirty talk. Holy moly. I feel like Tessa Bailey honestly should teach a course on writing dirty talk because she is freaking amazing at it, people. I mean, it didn't take much for me to fall for this man, so I couldn't blame Tallulah for doing it either. How he could say exactly what he wanted in such a hot and filthy way was fire for me. And then, to go ahead and also be sweet in planning this amazing first date for her. I mean, he was just genius. And I should say, as a complete side note, as someone who's lived in Boston for over 20 years, it was really cool to have that city as the setting for the novel. I have been to a lot of the places mentioned in the book, so that was really just neat to sort of live through the pages as well. I will say, a few nitpicky things that prevented me from giving it a 5-star read, like Fangirl Down. For example, it was insta-love, which I didn't have a problem with, but they really didn't know anything about each other before falling head over heels, because there really weren't many heart-to-hearts besides Tallulah's big one that showed me that they really got to know each other in that book. So, that's just one thing. And then the big moment of conflict sort of seemed out of character for Burgess, but again, I can totally let those slide. But this isn't also really your typical nanny romance, because you really don't see much of Tallulah, quote, nannying Lissa that much either. So just FYI on those. But I still thought it was great. I enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend you checking it out. All right, next up on my reading list was A Cowboy to Remember by Rebecca Weatherspoon, which had been on my TBR list for a really long time too, ever since that I heard that this book and I think the entire series is going to be made into a TV series at some point. So I finally cracked it open. This is a book about a hot African-American cowboy living it up in California and the girl who got away, who now, I think 10 years later, has amnesia and is somewhat forced to move in with him as she recovers because she has nowhere else to really do so safely. Now, I'll be honest and say that I stopped reading this one, maybe at the 40% mark. I can't remember now, and it's not that it was bad, but I was just finding it hard to really get into the story. It just felt really slow to me, and I felt like maybe it'd be better served if I read it at another time. I liked the amnesia piece, but I think what was missing was some more flashbacks or connection as to why the heroine of the story had once fell for the hero and why after just one argument they haven't spoken in 10 years. I didn't feel like that was sort of built up enough, and so it started to drag, but maybe I'll revisit it at another time, and so just a quick note on that one. Now, my next book, by this time, I think of the month, the podcast episode that I was on for Too Stupid to Live with Becky Feldman released, and I remembered how much fun we had talking about The Good Girl by Nikki Sloan. So I decided to check out The Architect, which is book 3 in her Nashville Neighborhood or Nashville Neighbors series, which are all taboo romances. And I did so because, FYI, all of these books in the series are now on Kindle Unlimited, and I don't think they ever had been on in KU before. So now's the perfect time to go over and check them out. The Architect is I guess forbidden, but not really, age gap, neighbors to lovers romance. But really at its core, to me, I think it's really a BDSM romance. Lilith is the heroine who is best friends with Cassidy, the heroine from book 1 in the series, but you really don't need to know that because this book, out of all of them in the series, is really a standalone. You don't need to have read any of the prior books, and nor are any of these characters really mentioned in the last 2 books of the series, so just FYI. But Lilith is living in her parents' guest house in the Nashville neighborhood and ends up helping Clay one night as he finds a stray cat at his house, and he's super afraid that he injured it. So he gets Lilith to help because he somehow knows that she's a vet tech. So she goes over to his house and helps, and then, of course, the 2 of them, recognize that they have sparks. Lilith then convinces Clay to adopt the cat, which shows some real attachment to him. But since he's going to be traveling a lot to work out of state, he gives Lilith a key to his place so she can come in and check on the cat while he's away during the work week. And then, but before he does leave, one night she surprises him and basically offers himself up to him. And so from at that point on, the 2 end up having a non-relationship, if you will, where she kind of learns that he's a dom and she may actually have this thing for being a sub. But what they really end up exploring is the S&M aspect of BDSM, as Clay likes to push the envelope of pain, and she seems to take pleasure in that pain. Now, that's sort of just setting the stage, right? Now, since Clay is away during the week, then he proposes to have Mr. E, as he calls him, stand in for Clay and deliver the choreographed scenes that he plans for Lilith while he watches on his phone or his laptop. Though at the beginning, Lilith and Mr. E are not allowed to speak to one another or have any other connection outside of the scenes that they have together. Now, I'll say that I'm not really into S&M, so while I think overall it was very well written, it is a book that explores the area of BDSM. And so there's really not a whole heck of a lot of characterization to any of these three main characters, besides honestly knowing their names and their occupations. There's really not much build up to their connection or love besides their involvement in these scenes with one another. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy that piece on its own, as I think it is a really great book that looks at people who love to give and receive pain. It sort of then delves into this poly relationship too, but that's sort of at the end of the book. Overall, I would say, though, if you're interested in a book that does look at how these three navigate a very unique relationship between a dom, a sub, and a new dom in their look at S&M, then you should definitely consider The Architect by Nikki Sloan and grab it on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, you still with me? I am continuing with one more book, last but certainly not least on my reading list for February 2024, and that is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I was super excited to read this book after reading Kennedy's first book in her Skyland series, which is called Before I Let Go. And that's why This Could Be Us made my list of most anticipated new romance books for 2024 for this year. And honestly, it did not disappoint. Definitely a 5-star read for me. This book is Soledad Barnes' story. Soledad is a domestic goddess who's always had her life kind of all planned out, right? But then her husband commits the greatest of betrayals, and honestly, not just one, but several. And her life and the life of her 3 daughters changes forever. Picking up the pieces of this shattered life, Soledad then embarks on a really amazing path of self-discovery, which then also includes a forbidden man that she shouldn't want but can't seem to resist. And I'll just say, right from the top, this was a fantastic book. As I wrote my review, I said I just love Kennedy Ryan's books because she packs so much into them to make them really more than just a romance. Don't get me wrong, I read them for the central love story and the happily ever after, of course, but I always sort of leave her books feeling as if I've either learned something new or had my perspective changed or was just kind of given more in her story. So This Could Be Us is a book about, really, to me, rising up from the ashes, right? Reminding yourself that you can stand on your own 2 feet and demonstrating also that parenting is the greatest act of selfless love, and yet a bit of self-centered love in your life is also necessary too. It's a book about sisterhood and family and finding your person. It's all of these things wrapped in one, and I totally loved it. Now, Soledad is a 41-year-old woman who has been married to Edward for 16 years. And honestly, just one scene with Edward and his nasty comment about his wife's particular body part was enough for me to see that this dude was just a bad guy. Soledad recognized that her marriage was not what it once was, but she was completely blindsided when her husband commits this ultimate betrayal, as I said, and not just one, in multiple ways. I'm not going to tell you because it'll be a total spoiler, but from that moment on, we get to see Soledad on this journey of recovery and discovery. Someone who takes her passions and what she's good at and makes those talents work for her. She also kind of pushes back on those who don't believe that being a homemaker is a job or that a normal job outside the home is the only way to get it done. And I really appreciated that Kennedy pressed this point. You know, women who stay at home and raise the kids are some of the hardest workers, right, that I know, as well as those who juggle both home and outside work responsibilities. Though really the story was about Soledad's heartbreak and her journey back to love. And I fully fell for Judah, the hero of this story. He is a man who, let's just say, walks the walk and talks the talk, right? He is a super present father who is there for his 2 twins who have autism. He is an amazing co-parent with his ex-wife. And he is a man who fell first and hard, but did not want to get in the way of Soledad's journey and yet showed her his support in so many small and meaningful ways as she was just, working on herself before she was ready to start another relationship. This is just one of those books, honestly, that I think was so well done and definitely deserved that 5-star rating. And it releases, tomorrow, March 5th. So definitely think you should put This Could Be Us on your TBR list. Woo! Okay, that wraps it up. And I think February was a really great month for reading, I have to say. And I'm already, because you know me, I can't just stop and smell the roses. I got to plug on. I'm already excited for what I have lined up for March, which includes what I'm reading now, Kate Stewart's latest release called Euro Dreams. Super excited for that one, as well as Lynn Painter's upcoming release in March, Happily Never After. I think that comes out next week. So stay tuned for my March reading list episode to hear about those books and others that I check out this coming month. Now, since it is now March, if you're following along with me with the annual romance book reading challenge, this month's challenge is to read either one contemporary romance book, which should be pretty easy to do, or one of my favorite reading prompts, which is to read a new author to you. If you need help with the selection, just drop me an email. I'd be happy to offer some suggestions. And then once you do pick your selection, be sure to join me and your fellow romance readers in my Facebook group, the She Reads Romance Books Reader Lounge, to share and talk about it. Okay, I know this is getting long, but before ending, I need to share the answer to the Name That Book Boyfriend from my last episode, where I talked about romance books where love is found after being cheated on. Now, to refresh your memory, here is my clue. Let me find it. Okay. This book boyfriend grew up on the wrong side of the tracks and fell for the girl with money. He became a self-made man who buys and sells companies, but he's also a man who seeks revenge, but realizes he's still married to the woman who stole his heart. Do you have an idea who this secret book boyfriend is? If you guessed Matthew Farrell from Paradise by Judith McNaught, then you are correct. One of my favorite romance books of all time. Well done. I hope this were kind of fun for you that I've been doing them over the last few episodes. Stay tuned because I'm going to test your romance book knowledge with a new quiz that will be available on She Reads Romance Books very soon. So in the meantime, you can join my newsletter list so you'll be the first to know when it goes live if you've been enjoying these Name That Book Boyfriend games that we've been playing. So thanks as always for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget to show some love on your way out and leave a rating. Until next time, happy reading because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support.
If you're a Book Boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.